bit of jowl for a while. They're quite furry, very furry.
Welcome to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 5. We have so much to cover here. Lots of Easter eggs, the history of Mandalore, ties to Rebels, the prequels, the Clone Wars, so let's get started. The episode begins with Din Djarin on a bounty in a slaughterhouse run by a Klatooinian named Kaba Bayaz. I loved his reintroduction. First we see him in silhouette, like it might be Boba Fett, but come on. You knew as soon as you saw it, you were like,
I know that show you wet anywhere.
And of course, when he appears, we get the whistle from his theme. It is really sad and weird though seeing him without Grogu, right? He's carrying a tracking fob just like we saw in Season 1 of The Mandalorian, and the Bounty Puck's Arabesh letters read wanted with the price of the bounty listed below. He says,
I can bring you in warm,
which calls back to the first episode of his own show.
or I can bring you in cold.
Although in that episode, it was implied that cold meant carbonite freezing. Here, it just means dead. Din doesn't have as many options without a ship. When you're taking the space bus, you're forced to put heads in a duffel bag and move on. This opening fight was awesome, mostly because we get to see how inexperienced Din is with the Darksaber. He screws up and cuts his own leg. That's why the Jedi had to train in their use of the Force for years before being able to handle lightsabers. Which also makes me wonder why these 5-year-olds in Attack of the Clones were using lightsabers. Maybe they were super low power or something. I also like that we see that losing Grogu has made him more brutal. He no longer has any reason to hold back. So this space station that he goes to is a lot like a Dyson sphere. That's a theoretical machine built to enclose the sun. Except this one, like Ninevalir, is a narrow band that was built around a star. But it ends with an open loop, which allows sunlight to be blocked and creates day and night for the people who live on it. Very cool. In the background here, we see a speeder that looks a lot like Luke's X-34. This other species in the elevator is a Cascadag, who first appeared in The Force Awakens, but have popped up in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. When Din enters the club, on the right-hand side, we see a Malastarian, and this woman is a cameo from an old friend of director Bryce Dallas Howard. This is your mom. The guildmaster he speaks to is an Ishi Tib, who appeared in the Clone Wars and the prequels.
More troops are needed.
Then he speaks to the Ishi guildmaster, voiced by Helen Sadler. Now she has voiced many Star Wars projects before, like the Lego Holiday Special where she played Rey.
It's Obi-Wan Kenobi training Anakin Skywalker. No, they didn't see me.
Hello there.
There's also a Quarren at the table, the aquatic species who are always bad guys in Star Wars. Then he tracks down the remains of his culvert that was slaughtered in Season 1 of The Mandalorian.
The Imperials arrived shortly thereafter. This is what resulted.
Now I like that he had to use hidden markings that only a Mandalorian's visor could reveal, kind of like old hobo code.
That's a pie. Means the food here is good.
You know, if the Book of Boba Fett's taught me anything, it's that I gotta get my hands on some Bacta. Look at Tamura Morrison. He's 61, and I fear him. I literally fear him. Unfortunately, for a lot of us, aging seems to equal declining, like how men lose 1 to 2% of their testosterone every year after you turn 30, and this can result in increased belly fat, muscle loss, fatigue, and depression. Today, 30 million men in the US have low testosterone that is affecting their daily lives. But that's where Hone comes in. They're the sponsor of this video. Hone helps you to optimize your hormone levels. Now look, I know that sounds strange, and I was wary of the process at first too. But that's because I am not a medical expert, but Hone is. They are a premier men's health clinic who only offer products and treatments prescribed by a physician that consults with you directly. To do this, they send you this sample home assessment so they can measure your biomarkers to gauge your testosterone level. And it comes with these lancets, which are painless, and the whole process is very easy to use. After you collect your sample, you mail it to the lab. Then you consult with a licensed physician online who can prescribe these FDA-approved medications. This is exactly what a doctor does for you in a physical office, but at a fraction of the cost. If you do meet the criteria, they give you 3 custom treatment options: a cream, a pill, or an injection. Afterwards, you might feel increased focus and muscle mass, decreased body fat, and better sleep. So for a limited time only, Screen Crush viewers get the at-home testing and a doctor consultation for only $45. Click the link in the description below to take advantage of this special offer now. Back to Boba Fett.
Hey, why's your hair all different now?
That's not important, moving on. Then we get the return of Emily Swallows the Armorer. She gives us a breakdown of Mandalorian history, most of which we did cover in this video. Now, if you haven't seen every episode of Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels, then you might have gotten a little lost here. So let me briefly explain the history of Mandalore and the Darksaber. If you want to skip ahead, the chapters are listed below. Like the Armorer says, Mandalorian history goes back 10,000 years when they first settled the planet by taming giant dinosaurs called mythosaurs, which she also mentions.
The songs of eons past foretold of the mythosaur rising up to herald a new age of Mandalore.
Mandalore is the only known source for Beskar, as the Mandalorians became famous for their Beskar armor. Now, because it's impervious to a Jedi's lightsabers, they were traditionally enemies of the Jedi. But one of them, Tar Vizsla, was Force sensitive and actually became a Jedi, and he forged the Darksaber. Then he later ruled all of Mandalore. After his death, the Jedi brought the saber back to their temple. But then, about 1,000 years ago, the Jedi temple was sacked. So then, members of Tar Vizsla's house, House Vizsla, reclaimed the Darksaber for their own. Then this tradition started, where the Darksaber was like the Elder Wand. To rightfully use it, you had to win it in combat. So while all this was going on, various Mandalorian civil wars destroyed their planet and turned it into a desert. So most of them became pacifists.
You know, dude, I myself dabbled in pacifism at one point.
And the warrior Mandalorians were exiled to their moon, Concordia, where the Armorer lived.
Had our sect not been cloistered on the moon of Concordia, we would have not survived the Great Purge.
Now, during the Clone Wars, Mandalore was ruled by Duchess Satine, who was the childhood crush of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Had you said the word, I would have left the Jedi Order.
Meanwhile, Tar Vizsla's descendant, a guy named Pre Vizsla, rules the moon Concordia. He has the Darksaber, and he wants to lead his warlike Mandalorians to conquer the planet.
That woman tarnishes the very name Mandalorian.
And yes, he is voiced by Jon Favreau. Now, his chief lieutenant is Bo-Katan, Katie Sackhoff's character from The Mandalorian, and she's also the sister of Duchess Satine. So, Pre Vizsla makes an alliance with Darth Maul, they conquer Mandalore, but then Maul double-crosses him, kills Pre Vizsla, and wins the Darksaber. Then Bo-Katan leads an insurrection against Darth Maul, and Maul kills Satine. And eventually, Anakin's former Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, helped Bo-Katan liberate Mandalore. Now, you remember Ahsoka from Season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Surrender, or face the consequences.
She defeated Darth Maul in a duel, which technically makes her the owner of the Darksaber, but whatever. So the Darksaber disappears for about a decade or so before it is recovered by a Mandalorian named Sabine Wren, who then wins it in a duel with another Mandalorian who's not really important right now. But then Sabine decides to give the Darksaber to Bo-Katan so she can use it to unite their people. But to a lot of Mandalorians, this means that Bo-Katan's rule was illegitimate, like the Armorer said.
She once laid claim to rule Mandalore based purely on blood and the sword you now possess. But it was gifted to her and not won by creed.
So when Moff Gideon led the siege of Mandalore, he won the Darksaber from Bo-Katan, which is why she's so keen to fight him in Season 2.
I will kill the Moff and retake what is rightfully mine.
So hopefully that places a lot of this episode in the right context for you. Now, there is a cool fan theory, by the way, that the Armorer was one of the followers of Darth Maul, and that's why she has spikes on her helmet. Several of his followers also emulated his horned head. After all, in the Season 1 flashback, we saw that the Mandalorians who rescued Din are members of Death Watch, judging by this insignia on their armor. Death Watch was the sect of violent Mandalorians that Pre Vizsla led from the moon Concordia. So it is very possible that the Armorer was part of Death Watch and then switched allegiance to Darth Maul when he won the Darksaber. Now, this big guy is named Paz Vizsla, and he's kin to both Tar and Pre Vizsla. Remember, he threw Din Djarin some lip in Chapter 3, and they almost dueled.
Our world was shattered by the Empire, with whom this coward shares tables.
Now, even though they ended up on good terms,
This is the way. This is the way.
Now he wants to reclaim the Darksaber for his house. During their duel, he uses a shield generator like we saw Mandalorians using in the Clone Wars animated series. And geez, man, never any handrails in Star Wars.
They said they're worried we'd be leaning all day.
Now, we did learn that the Darksaber's hilt is made of Beskar, which I don't think we actually knew before. When the Armorer flashes back to the second siege of Mandalore, there are a ton of Easter eggs. First of all, this is the Night of 1,000 Tears, which we heard Moff Gideon mention before.
When gunships outfitted with similar ordnance laid waste to fields of Mandalorian recruits in the Night of 1,000 Tears.
And this is also the Great Purge that Paz Vizsla talked about in Season 1.
These are the spoils of the Great Purge.
So during this apocalyptic event, we see TIE bombers in the domed cities of Mandalore that we first saw in the Clone Wars, and they're being crushed by atomic bombs. We see Imperial probe droids from Empire Strikes Back assisting Imperial KX droids like K2SO from Rogue One.
Quiet! And there's a fresh one if you mouth off again.
This whole sequence is very reminiscent of the future that we see in the Terminator films. Now, presumably, the Empire is using droids because of the dangers of atomic radiation on the ground, and the probe droids could find deposits of Beskar. And actually, come to think of it, the armorer mentions the mines below Mandalore.
Beneath the mines of Mandalore.
So, when the violent Mandalorians were exiled to the moon, they were actually being cut off from the Beskar that they could use to make more armor. Very interesting. Din says that he wants to see Grogu again.
I want to see him.
I mean, don't we all?
I would like to see the baby.
And the armorer tells him,
Jedi must forego all attachment.
Which was the dogmatic rule that led to Anakin's downfall.
Are you allowed to love? Thought that was forbidden for a Jedi.
Attachment is forbidden.
And then, she makes him a little chainmail Beskar mithril armor. Ferd Singer on Twitter has a fun theory that this Beskar armor will save Grogu when Kylo Ren destroys Luke's Jedi temple. During Din's Darksaber training, the armorer addresses the weight of the weapon.
It gets heavier with each move.
That is because you are fighting against the blade.
And Brent Mason on Twitter reminds us that when ex-Padawan Kanan Jarrus taught Sabine to use the Darksaber, he gave a similar lesson.
That sword is old, heavy, but powerful. High, low.
And the language she's speaking is Mandoa, the ancient language of Mandalore. Now, it's kind of hard to make out what she's saying, but I definitely heard the word Solos, which is 1, which makes me think that she's given him a 1, 2, 3, 4 count. Now, after his duel, he has to admit that he removed his helmet, which is like an Amish kid coming home and telling his mom that he had sex on his Rumspringer. I think it's very interesting that even after all the character growth he went through and meeting helmetless Mandalorians, he still retreats back to his old life.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
See, he's now at a place where he's trying to go back to the life that he once knew, but he can't actually return to it. He's on an artificial world, leading an artificial life.
I can't go back out there. This is the only life I know.
And now Din has been given a new quest to redeem himself in the waters of the mines of Mandalore, where Beskar was originally found.
One may only be redeemed in the living waters beneath the mines of Mandalore.
All of this is setting up the next season of The Mandalorian, where he could return to Mandalore and reluctantly claim the throne of the planet.
Now, it belongs to her.
She can't take it.
And then, poor guy, he's got a fly commercial to get everywhere now that the Razor Crest is gone.
I have dreamed a dream, but now that dream is gone from me.
A PA says, and sure, why not? Tatooine used to be the planet furthest from the bright center of the universe, but apparently now it's just where everybody wants to go. Now, this whole commercial flight is very reminiscent of the Star Tours ride at the Disney parks. And just to hit home on that, the droid who greets Mando is an R3X model, like we see on that same ride. In fact, this whole commercial spaceport sequence could be a cheeky advertisement for the new Galactic Star Cruiser hotel experience at Disney World, where you can stay in an immersive Star Wars environment for 2 days. Disney, if you're watching this video, and if you want any video store clerks from YouTube to review your new hotel, I would be willing to leave the store and give it a shot. Also on the ship, there is an astromech droid serving drinks, just like in Jennifer Beals' bar in Mos Espa and R2-D2 on the sail barge.
Well, I can see you're serving drinks.
While boarding the transport, Mando walks by a Nikto, and Gregor Wilderman on Twitter pointed out that this person is wearing the coat of a range trooper that we saw in Solo. I thought it was funny that the case he empties his weapons into is just a Pelican case that's painted white. And oh my god, what's inside of it? What is that? It's hexagons!
Not the beast!
And then he empties several weapons into it, including his whistling birds, and, as Alexander on Twitter points out, one of the blasters belonging to Din is a Liberator single-shot pistol used by European resistance fighters. It's nice that Star Wars continues the tradition of making blasters from World War II guns. His main blaster is also based on a German pistol from over 130 years ago. Very cool catch. And of course, this little package is shaped like Grogu, and Zephyr 44 caught that the music that plays is Grogu's theme from when Din first learned his name.
Grogu?
Yes.
The Rodian child in the seat in front of him probably also reminded him of Grogu. When they land on Tatooine, this pagoda in the background was part of Ralph McQuarrie's original concept art for Tatooine. That was actually reused in The Force Awakens. And then we go back to Peli's shop to a little BD droid. This is a lot like BD-1, the droid from Jedi Fallen Order. In fact, this droid hurts his foot, just like BD's foot is broken when you first meet him in the game.
Wait, I can help you with that.
Peli has her usual crew of droids helping her. There are the pit droids from the Phantom Menace, but also notice R5-D4. This droid first appeared in A New Hope. And then we saw it again in The Mandalorian Chapter 5 here. Now, director Dave Filoni actually had the crew create burn marks where his motivator went bad, so we would know that it was the same droid. But now, Peli has cleaned up the damage but left a hole where that bad motivator used to be. That's not a bad little journey for Skippy the Jedi droid. Now, we don't really see what attacks Peli, but I'm going to assume that it was an ROUS.
Rodents of unusual size? I don't think they exist.
I'm just kidding, it was a womp rat. And then Peli unveils a bit of Zoomer nostalgia, a freaking N1 Naboo starfighter from the Phantom Menace. Now, I've always loved the sleek, Flash Gordon design of these ships, and I am glad they're back. Now, I was thinking that maybe this ship could be on Tatooine because a collector heard that Anakin Skywalker flew it, and since he was a racing celebrity, this would be a collector's item. But the designation on the side of these two fighters don't match. Bummer. She finds a family of rodents inside.
Look, a family of scurriers.
And we first saw these Tatooine-based rodents in the special edition of A New Hope. And she describes the ship's speed by saying,
is I'm gonna add on some custom modifications that'll make her faster than a fathier.
And these are the racing animals that we saw abused in The Last Jedi. She also mentions,
and did I mention she could jump into hyperspace with no docking ring?
And you remember docking rings, right? Like when Obi-Wan's Jedi starfighter needed to travel through hyperspace at Attack of the Clones. Vic Digital on Twitter had a great observation. In addition to the ring world and ring armor, a hyperdrive ring is mentioned. Rings are symbolic for joining. Many cultures use rings to symbolize that people have been joined together in marriage. And the Olympic rings symbolize that nations are joined together. And she also name drops the Galactic Republic.
You know how hard it is to find all original parts from way back in the Galactic Republic?
And man, watching a great comedian like Amy Sedaris speaking Jawa was great. And I also like that she modified the ship to basically give him a NOS button. This whole sequence was like a couple of old friends working on a classic car together. In fact, Gregor Wilderman on Twitter points out that this exposed radiator on top of the N1 is in the same tradition of muscle cars that George Lucas used to like and drive. Pretty sure he still likes and drives them. During the repairs, Mando thanks the droid.
Where does this panel go? Thanks, little guy.
Showing how far he's come from his blatant droid racism in Season 1.
No droids.
And Grogu Not Baby Yoda on Twitter points out the parallels between this
Higher. Yeah, just a little. No, a little higher.
And this.
A little higher! Just a little higher!
They also use a gonk droid for power since they're basically walking batteries. Now, the piece that he has the Jawas bring him, the cryogenic density combustion booster, is the pole that they used to hold up the trash compactor in A New Hope. And the way they got it,
they said they crawled under a Pike Spice runner and crimped it off while they were refueling.
Is basically like stealing a catalytic converter from under a car. Not that I know how to do that. Din is also shocked that Peli could acquire some of these parts.
Where did you get this?
Now, I'm wondering if there were actually extra Nabooian parts laying around Tatooine that were busted from Amidala's cruiser in the Phantom Menace, and they're like still kicking around a few decades later. When it starts up, the sound of the engine failing
It's not turning over.
is used all over Star Wars.
Watch this.
And sound designer Ben Burt originally recorded this from a biplane.
Laid out on the multi-track tape recorder over here. The first thing is the inertia starter off an old 1928 biplane.
Now, I did love that when they filmed him flying, the camera is placed down in the cockpit, because in a real cockpit, this is the only place you could put the camera. There would be no way to mount it outside of the ship for the kind of shots that we see in the Phantom Menace. Then he retraces the pod race track going into Beggar's Canyon and flying by a womp rat. Just like Luke's childhood.
I used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. They're just like Beggar's Canyon back home.
Danny Burgum on Twitter points out that the ramp is even still busted from Anakin's pod race. And Fid Mahana on Twitter points out that after racing the track, he tries spinning because
that's a good trick.
When he's stopped by the space cops, he says,
Ferric.
a standard Star Wars curse word.
Dang Ferric, she's fast.
The younger X-Wing pilot is played by Max Lloyd-Jones, who was the stand-in for Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian Season 2. Thanks B Dazzler on Twitter for that observation. And the other cop is played by Paul Sung-Hyung Lee, reprising his role from Mandalorian Season 2. Now when he lands, Din calls the ship
Wizard.
Which is how Anakin's friend described his pod.
This is so wizard, Anakin.
And then we end with the best tease of all time.
I gotta pay a visit to a little friend.
Which is a lot like Luke's partying with his friends in Return of the Jedi.
I have a promise to keep. To an old friend.
Now practically this means that Boba Fett is on his own for at least one more episode before Din Djarin shows up in the final confrontation with the Pikes. Very cool. And did you notice that in the concept art, the Rodian kid is wearing a toy helmet and has a toy X-Wing, reminiscent of both Rey and young Luke. So as far as my thoughts on the episode as a whole, here's a nitpick. I don't like it when places in Star Wars are too close to what we experience in real life, like the sports bar and the diner in Attack of the Clones. They're too close to modern day locations. But the Mos Eisley Cantina is almost medieval looking, so it's kind of more universal. The slaughterhouse in the beginning looks too modern, right down to the plastic strips used in actual walk-in freezers to keep rooms cold. This looks like where Rocky trained for his fight with Apollo Creed. It's not very Star Warsy. But other than that, I mean, the best episode of the Book of Boba Fett did not feature Boba Fett at all. A lot of people are down on this show, but I think it has a lot of great elements. But we did just release a video where I talk about how the flashbacks are halting the story. In the video, I compare it to how the flashbacks work in Godfather 2 and explain the traditional role of flashbacks in films. So if you want to know about my thoughts on that in more detail, check out that video. I still think the show should have been presented in chronological order, so we would have had a more clear idea of what Boba Fett wants and why he wants to build a criminal empire. And then we have this episode, which is great, but completely halts the forward momentum of the story of Boba Fett and reminds audiences that there is a better Star Wars show that we would rather be watching. And now he's about to go off and find Grogu again, and fans want to see that way more than we want to see what happens with the Pikes. Like, I don't know, this was a very weird choice for this show, but I'm excited to see where it goes. I loved this episode, but I kind of wish it were just the season premiere of The Mandalorian Season 3, and that it simply crossed over with the season of the Book of Boba Fett, like an old comic book crossover. Well, we do have 2 more episodes to go, and you never know, all the pieces of the Book of Boba Fett might come together perfectly, and justify the use of flashbacks as a storytelling device. I mean, I sure hope so, because I love this interconnected world that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and company are building. But what were your thoughts on the episode? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.